The darkness had swallowed her whole, and Hannah Foster was beginning to wonder if she would ever see sunlight again. Her fingers were raw from clawing at the wooden door above her head, splinters embedded deep beneath her nails. The cellar had become her tomb 4 days ago when Marcus Riley and his gang had dragged her from her family's ranch and thrown her into this abandoned storm shelter 15 miles outside of Taylor, Texas. They had been looking for her father, a former lawman who had testimony that could hang them all. When they could not find him, they took her instead, locking her in this pit as insurance, promising to return once her father came looking. But no one had come. The men had not returned. Her screams had faded to whimpers, then to silence. The water barrel they had mockingly left her was nearly empty now, and the darkness pressed against her eyes like a physical weight. She had lost track of time in the absolute blackness, measuring hours by the rhythm of her own heartbeat and the occasional scurrying of rats across the dirt floor. Hannah was 19 years old, and she had never known terror like this. The air was thick and stale, and every breath felt like swallowing dust. She had tried singing hymns to keep herself sane, had tried praying, had tried everything she could think of to ward off the crushing panic. But the silence always returned, heavier than before. Above ground, the June sun beat down mercilessly on the Texas prairie. Isaiah Pike rode his chestnut mare slowly across the scrubland, his keen eyes scanning the horizon. He was 24, a cowboy who had spent the last 6 years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas and back again. His face was weathered beyond his years, tanned dark from endless days under the sun, and his green eyes held the sharp awareness of a man who had learned to read danger in the smallest signs. He had been riding toward Taylor when he spotted the disturbed earth near an old cottonwood tree. Something was not right. The ground showed fresh horse tracks, at least 4 riders, and they circled around what looked like an old storm shelter he remembered from years back. Isaiah had grown up in these parts before heading north to work the ranches, and he knew every hidden structure for miles around. He dismounted carefully, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. The tracks were recent, maybe 3 or 4 days old. As he approached the shelter, he noticed the heavy beam that had been wedged across the door, and his jaw tightened. Whatever was down there, someone had not wanted it getting out. Isaiah pressed his ear to the wood and listened. At first, nothing. Then, so faint he almost missed it, a shallow, rasping breath. "Hello," he called out, his voice low but carrying. "Someone down there." Inside the darkness, Hannah's eyes flew open. She had been drifting in and out of consciousness, her body weak from dehydration and hunger. For a moment she thought she had imagined the voice, then it came again. "Is someone in there? Can you hear me?" "Yes." The word tore from her throat like broken glass. "Yes, please, I am down here. Please help me." Isaiah immediately began working at the beam, but it had been wedged tight and secured with rope. He drew his knife and began sawing through the bindings, working as fast as he could. "Hold on," he called down. "I am getting you out." "What is your name?" "Hannah," she gasped. "Hannah Foster." "They locked me here. Days ago. I do not know how many." "I have got you, Hannah. Just hold on a little longer." Isaiah's muscles strained as he finally freed the beam and heaved it aside. The door itself was locked from the outside with a heavy padlock. He did not waste time trying to pick it. Instead, he took several steps back, drew his revolver, and fired twice at the lock mechanism. The shots echoed across the empty prairie, and the lock shattered. Isaiah yanked the door open, and the smell of stale air and human waste hit him immediately. He grabbed the lantern from his saddle and lit it quickly, then descended the narrow wooden steps into the shelter. The light revealed a small figure huddled in the corner, and Isaiah's heart clenched. Hannah was curled on the ground, her dress filthy and torn, her dark hair matted and wild around her pale face. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her eyes squinting painfully against the sudden light. She looked like she had been buried alive. "Sweet mercy," Isaiah breathed. He holstered his gun and moved to her side, kneeling in the dirt. "Hannah, I am Isaiah. I am going to get you out of here." She tried to stand, but her legs would not hold her. Isaiah did not hesitate. He scooped her up in his arms as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. She was light, too light, and he could feel her trembling. Hannah's head lolled against his shoulder, and she made a small sound that might have been relief or might have been a sob. "I've got you," he murmured, carrying her up the steps and out into the brilliant sunshine. Hannah cried out and buried her face against his shirt, the light searing her eyes after so many days in darkness. Isaiah immediately turned so his body shaded her face. "Easy now. Your eyes need time. Just keep them closed." He carried her to a spot beneath the cottonwood tree where the shade was thick and cool. He laid her down gently on his bedroll, which he had quickly spread on the ground. Hannah kept her eyes squeezed shut, but tears were streaming down her dirty cheeks. Isaiah grabbed his canteen and carefully tilted it to her lips. "Slow sips," he instructed. "Not too much at once or you will be sick." Hannah drank desperately, and he had to pull the canteen back. I know you are thirsty, but trust me, slow." She nodded weakly, and he let her have another small sip. Her hands came up to clutch his wrist, holding the canteen in place. Her fingers were bloody and torn, and fury kindled in Isaiah's chest at the sight. "What kind of men would do this to a young woman? Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. "Marcus Riley and his gang," Hannah whispered, her voice hoarse. "They were looking for my father. He is a former lawman. He has testimony about crimes they committed. They took me to force him to stay quiet." Isaiah's expression darkened. He knew the name Marcus Riley. Everyone in Texas knew it. The man was wanted in 3 counties for robbery, cattle rustling, and murder. "Where is your father now?" "Dead." The word came out flat and broken. "He died 6 months ago. Heart gave out. They did not know. They thought he was hiding. They thought he would come for me if they took me." A sob caught in her throat. "No one was coming. No one knew where I was." Isaiah felt something crack open in his chest. This woman had been left to die in the dark, waiting for a rescue that could never come, holding on to hope even as it slowly bled away. He reached out and carefully brushed a strand of matted hair from her face. "Someone came," he said softly. "You are safe now. I promise you, you are safe." Hannah finally opened her eyes, just a crack, adjusting slowly to the filtered light beneath the tree. She saw a young man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His face was strong and honest, and when he looked at her, there was such genuine concern there that something in her chest eased for the first time in days. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finding me." "No thanks needed." Isaiah stood and moved to his horse, returning with a piece of jerky and some hardtack. "Can you eat? You need food, but start small." Hannah managed a few bites, though her stomach cramped painfully. Isaiah watched her carefully, giving her water in small doses, letting her rest in the shade. He wet his bandana and gently cleaned the dirt from her face and hands, carefully avoiding the worst of her injuries. She winced but did not pull away. "We need to get you to a doctor," Isaiah said. "Taylor is the closest town, about 15 miles east. Can you ride?" Hannah looked uncertain. "I do not know. I can try." "You will ride with me," Isaiah decided. "I am not putting you on a horse alone in your condition." He helped her to her feet and she swayed dangerously. Isaiah caught her immediately, his arm around her waist. "I've got you. Just lean on me." He lifted her onto his mare and then swung up behind her, settling her sideways across his lap so she could rest against his chest. Hannah did not protest. She was beyond caring about propriety. She just wanted to feel safe, and somehow in this stranger's arms she did. Isaiah urged the horse into a gentle walk, keeping one arm securely around Hannah while he held the reins with the other. She drifted in and out of sleep as they rode, exhausted beyond measure. Every time she startled awake, Isaiah would murmur reassurances, and she would relax again. The ride to Taylor took 4 hours at their careful pace. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Hannah was barely conscious, her body finally giving in to the trauma of the past days. Isaiah rode straight to the doctor's office, a small building near the center of town. He dismounted carefully, keeping Hannah in his arms, and kicked at the door. "Doc Miller, I need help." An older man with silver hair and spectacles opened the door, took one look at Hannah, and immediately ushered them inside. "What happened?" "Found her locked in a storm shelter," Isaiah said, laying her down on the examination table. "Been down there at least 4 days without food or proper water. Marcus Riley's gang did it." Dr. Miller's face hardened. "That bastard. All right, son, you did good bringing her here. Let me take a look at her." Isaiah stepped back reluctantly, suddenly unwilling to leave her side. Hannah's eyes found his, wide and frightened. "Do not go," she whispered. "I am right here," Isaiah assured her. "I am not going anywhere." Dr. Miller examined her thoroughly while Isaiah waited, his hat in his hands, watching every move the doctor made. Finally, the older man straightened and sighed. "She is severely dehydrated and malnourished. Her hands need tending and she has some bruising, but nothing appears broken. She was lucky you found her when you did. Another day or two and we would be having a very different conversation." "What does she need?" Isaiah asked. "Rest, food, water, and time. I will clean and bandage her hands. She needs to stay somewhere she can be monitored for the next few days." Dr. Miller looked at Isaiah. "She have family in town." "I do not know," Isaiah admitted. He looked at Hannah, who had been listening quietly. "Do you have family here? Anyone I can fetch?" Hannah shook her head weakly. "My father was my only family. The ranch is gone. We lost it to debt after he died. I have been working as a seamstress for Mrs. Patterson on the edge of town. I have a room above her shop." "I know Patricia Patterson," Dr. Miller said. "Good woman, I will send word to her. But Hannah, you are in no condition to be alone tonight. I would keep you here, but I have no beds available. My other room is occupied with a man recovering from a broken leg." Isaiah found himself speaking before he fully thought it through. "She can stay at the boarding house. I will get her a room and make sure she is looked after." Dr. Miller raised an eyebrow but nodded. "That would work. Mrs. Chen runs a respectable establishment. She will make sure the girl is properly cared for." He turned to Hannah. "Let me bandage those hands and then you can go, but you come back tomorrow so I can check on you. Understood?" Hannah nodded. The doctor worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning the wounds and wrapping her hands in clean white bandages. Isaiah paid the doctor's fee without hesitation, waving off Hannah's weak protests. "You can pay me back when you are on your feet," he said, though he had no intention of collecting. He carried her to the boarding house, ignoring the stares of townsfolk on the street. Mrs. Chen, a practical Chinese woman who had come to Texas with the railroad workers and stayed to build her own business, took one look at them and asked no questions. She showed Isaiah to a clean room on the 2nd floor and brought up warm water, clean clothes that had belonged to her daughter, and a bowl of broth. Isaiah set Hannah down on the bed, and she immediately slumped against the pillows. Mrs. Chen shooed him out so she could help Hannah wash and change into the clean nightdress. When Isaiah was allowed back in, Hannah looked more human, though still painfully frail. Her dark hair had been brushed and braided, and her face was clean. She looked younger now, vulnerable. Mrs. Chen left them alone, and Isaiah pulled a chair up beside the bed. Hannah sipped the broth slowly, and color began to return to her cheeks. When she finished, she set the bowl aside and looked at Isaiah properly for the first time. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "I was dying down there. I had given up." "Do not think about that now," Isaiah said. "You are safe. That is what matters. Why did you help me? You do not even know me." Isaiah was quiet for a moment, turning his hat over in his hands. "I reckon that is exactly why. You needed help and I was there. Simple as that." "Nothing is ever that simple," Hannah said, but her eyes were warm. "You are a good man, Isaiah Pike." He felt heat rise in his cheeks and cleared his throat. "You need rest. I will be here in town for a few days. I will check on you tomorrow." "Where are you going?" There was an edge of panic in her voice. "Just to get a room of my own," Isaiah said quickly. "Right down the hall. I am not leaving, I promise." Hannah visibly relaxed. All right, good." Isaiah stood, but her voice stopped him at the door. "Isaiah, thank you for everything. For not riding past, for caring enough to stop." He turned and met her eyes. In the lamplight they were the color of warm honey. Something shifted in his chest, a feeling he could not quite name. "Get some rest, Hannah. Tomorrow is a new day." He left before he could say anything else, before he could examine too closely the way his heart had started beating faster when she said his name. The next 3 days fell into a pattern. Isaiah would check on Hannah in the morning, bringing her breakfast from the boarding house kitchen. He would sit with her while she ate and they would talk. He learned about her childhood on the ranch, about her father's work as a lawman, about the hard years after his death. She learned about his life on the cattle drives, the places he had seen, the dangers he had faced. Hannah's strength returned slowly. By the second day, she could walk around the room without getting dizzy. By the third day, she insisted on going downstairs for meals, though Isaiah stayed close, ready to catch her if she stumbled. It was during one of those meals that the trouble found them. Isaiah and Hannah were sitting in the boarding house dining room, sharing a plate of fried chicken and potatoes, when the door slammed open. 3 men walked in, dirty and dangerous looking. The man in front was tall with a scarred face and cold eyes. Isaiah recognized him from wanted posters. Marcus Riley. Isaiah's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but Riley was faster. He had his revolver drawn and pointed at Isaiah before he could clear leather. "I would not do that, Cowboy. Real slow now, put your hands on the table." Isaiah complied, his mind racing. Beside him, Hannah had gone white as a sheet. "You," she breathed. Riley's smile was cruel. "Miss Foster, you are a hard woman to kill. I figured you would be dead by now, but here you are, looking healthy and well-fed." He glanced at Isaiah. "I take it we have you to thank for that." "What do you want, Riley?" Isaiah's voice was calm, but his muscles were coiled tight. "What I always wanted, for her daddy to keep his mouth shut. But seeing as he is dead, the girl is my insurance that nobody else comes looking into my business. See, turns out he wrote down everything he knew. Left a journal, and the lady here knows where it is." Riley's gun shifted to point at Hannah. "Don't you, sweetheart?" Hannah's voice shook. "I do not know what you are talking about. I do not know anything about a journal." "Liar!" Riley's shout made everyone in the room flinch. "Your daddy was a meticulous man. He wrote everything down. I know he did, and I know he would have given it to you for safekeeping. Now you are going to tell me where it is, or your new friend here is going to die real slow." Isaiah's mind worked frantically. He needed to create an opening, some distraction. His eyes flicked around the room. Mrs. Chen stood frozen by the kitchen door. 2 other diners had fled when Riley entered. It was just them and Riley's 2 men. "She does not have it," Isaiah said suddenly. "I do." Riley's attention snapped to him. "You? How would you have it? Found it in the storm shelter," Isaiah lied smoothly. "Leather journal hidden in the rafters. Figured it was important, so I kept it. Was planning to give it to the marshal." Riley studied him, suspicious. "Where is it?" "In my room, upstairs. I can take you to it." "No." Hannah grabbed Isaiah's arm. "Do not. He will kill you." "He will kill both of us if I do not," Isaiah said quietly. He looked at her, trying to convey a message with his eyes. "Trust me." "It is all right, Hannah. Let me do this." Riley seemed to consider, then nodded. "Fine. You and me, we will go get this journal. But if you are lying, your pretty lady friend here is dead. Tommy, you stay here and keep your gun on her. He tries anything funny, you shoot her. Understood?" The man called Tommy grinned and moved closer to Hannah, his revolver pointed at her head. Isaiah forced himself to stay calm as he stood. "Upstairs. Second door on the left." He led Riley and the other gang member up the stairs, his mind racing. There was no journal, of course. But he needed to separate Riley from Hannah and create an opportunity. As they reached his room, Isaiah opened the door and stepped inside. The room was small, with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. His saddlebags were on the chair. "In the saddlebags," Isaiah said, moving toward them. "Hold it," Riley said. "You stay right there. Charlie, check the bags." The other man moved past Isaiah and began rifling through the saddlebags. Isaiah knew he had seconds before they realized he had lied. He had positioned himself near the washstand where his razor lay on the small table. As Charlie announced, "There is nothing here, Marcus." Isaiah grabbed the washbasin and hurled it at Riley. Water and porcelain exploded against Riley's chest. Isaiah did not wait. He lunged forward, driving his shoulder into Riley's gut before the man could recover. They crashed into the hallway, and Isaiah heard the revolver clatter away. Charlie was shouting and reaching for his own gun. Isaiah rolled, grabbed Riley's lost revolver, and fired twice. Charlie went down, clutching his shoulder. Riley recovered and punched Isaiah hard in the jaw, and stars exploded across his vision. They grappled on the floor, Riley trying to get the gun away from Isaiah. Below, Isaiah heard a crash and Hannah's scream. Terror gave him strength. He brought his knee up hard into Riley's stomach and smashed the butt of the revolver against his temple. Riley went limp. Isaiah scrambled to his feet and ran for the stairs. In the dining room, chaos had erupted. Tommy had Hannah by the hair, his gun pressed to her side. But Mrs. Chen stood behind him, holding a cast iron skillet, and as Isaiah appeared, she brought it down on Tommy's head with all her might. The man crumpled and Hannah stumbled away. Isaiah was across the room in an instant, pulling Hannah into his arms. She was shaking violently, but she was alive. He held her tight, one hand cradling the back of her head. "I've got you. You are all right. You are all right." Hannah clutched his shirt, her face buried against his chest. Around them, other boarders emerged cautiously. Someone ran for the marshal. Isaiah just held Hannah, feeling her heart racing against his own. The marshal arrived with 2 deputies. Isaiah explained everything while they secured Riley and his men. Charlie was wounded but alive. Tommy was unconscious but breathing. Riley was dazed and cursing. Marshal Davies, a grizzled veteran with a thick mustache, looked impressed. "You took down Marcus Riley and his gang by yourself?" he asked Isaiah. "Mrs. Chen helped," Isaiah said, nodding toward the woman who was calmly cleaning her skillet. "And I had good motivation." He glanced at Hannah, who had not left his side. Marshal Davies took their statements and promised that Riley and his men would hang for their crimes. There were enough charges against them in 3 counties to ensure justice. As the lawman led the gang away, Hannah finally spoke, her voice stronger than it had been since Isaiah found her. "You lied to him. About the journal." I had to get him away from you, Isaiah said simply. You could have been killed. So could you? He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Hannah, I would rather die than let them hurt you again. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Hannah reached up and touched his face, her bandaged fingers gentle against his bruised jaw. You are bleeding. I will live. He caught her hand and held it carefully. Hannah, I need to tell you something. What? I'm not good with words. I am just a cowboy. I have spent my life drifting from town to town, job to job, never had a reason to stay anywhere. He paused, struggling for the right words. But these past few days, being here with you, I have felt something I have never felt before. Like maybe I found something worth staying for. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but they were not sad. Isaiah Pike, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I am falling in love with you, Isaiah said, the words coming easier now. I know it is fast. I know we just met. But when I pulled you out of that darkness, when I saw you in my arms, something in my heart just knew. You are it for me, Hannah Foster, if you will have me. Hannah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You saved my life. You protected me. You made me feel safe when I thought I would never feel safe again. How could I not love you? Isaiah's face broke into a smile and he cupped her face in his hands. Can I kiss you? Yes, Hannah whispered. Please, yes. He leaned down and kissed her softly, carefully, as if she were something precious. Hannah's hands came up to grip his shoulders, and she kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. It was a kiss that tasted of hope and new beginnings, of darkness overcome and light found. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. I do not have much, he said. Just my horse, my gear, and whatever I can earn working, but I will work hard, Hannah. I will give you a good life, I promise you that. I do not need much, Hannah said. I just need you. The next weeks unfolded like a dream. Isaiah found work at a ranch just outside of Taylor, good steady work that paid well. Hannah returned to her position as a seamstress, though Mrs. Patterson gave her time to fully heal. Isaiah visited her every evening after work, and they would walk through the town together, talking and laughing, learning everything about each other. Isaiah courted her properly, with flowers and dinners and long conversations on the porch of the boarding house. He met her friends, and she met his. Everyone in Taylor soon knew about the cowboy who had rescued Hannah Foster, and the love that had bloomed from that terrible ordeal. 2 months after they met, on a warm August evening, Isaiah got down on one knee in front of the boarding house and asked Hannah to marry him. He had saved his wages and bought a simple gold band, and when he presented it to her, his hands were shaking. Hannah Foster, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you happy, keeping you safe, and loving you with everything I have? Hannah did not hesitate. Yes. Yes, Isaiah, 1,000 times yes. They married in September in the small church in Taylor. Hannah wore a dress she had sewn herself, white lace with pearl buttons. Isaiah wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, looking nervous and proud. Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Patterson stood as witnesses, along with half the town who had come to see the wedding. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife and Isaiah kissed his bride, there was not a dry eye in the church. They were young, yes, but their love was real and hard-won, forged in darkness and brought to light. Isaiah had saved enough to put a down payment on a small piece of land east of town. It was not much, just 20 acres with a small cabin, but it was theirs. He worked for the ranch during the day and spent his evenings improving their home, adding a porch and fixing the roof. Hannah made curtains for the windows and planted a garden. They worked side by side, building their life together. The first year of marriage was not without challenges. Money was tight, and the work was hard. There were days when Isaiah came home so exhausted he could barely stand, and days when Hannah's hands ached from hours of sewing. But they faced everything together, and at night they would lie in each other's arms and count their blessings. Hannah still had nightmares about the darkness sometimes. She would wake gasping, convinced she was back in that underground prison. But Isaiah would hold her, whispering reassurances until she calmed. He never made her feel weak for her fear. He just loved her through it. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaiah one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He stared at her for a long moment, then swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. They both cried happy tears, holding each other as the sun painted the sky in gold and crimson. Their son was born in January of 1876, during a cold snap that frosted the windows and made the wood stove work overtime. Isaiah paced outside the bedroom while Mrs. Patterson and the doctor attended Hannah. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst through the door, unable to stay away a moment longer. Hannah lay exhausted in the bed, her hair damp with sweat, but her face was radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket Hannah had knitted herself. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Isaiah approached on shaking legs and looked down at the baby. He was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and a surprisingly loud voice. Something expanded in Isaiah's chest, a love so fierce and overwhelming that it brought tears to his eyes. "He is perfect," Isaiah whispered. "Hannah, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Hannah's father. Little Thomas Pike was a healthy, happy baby who grew strong and quick. Isaiah was a devoted father, coming home from work each day eager to hold his son. He would sit with Thomas on the porch, telling him stories about cattle drives and wild horses, even though the baby was far too young to understand. Hannah would watch them together, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was the life she had dreamed of during those dark days underground, the life she thought she would never have. A home, a husband who loved her, a child to cherish. It was more than she had dared to hope for. As Thomas grew, so did their family. 3 years after Thomas was born, they welcomed a daughter they named Rose. She had Hannah's dark eyes and Isaiah's green-flecked gaze, a striking combination. She was a spirited child, fearless and curious, always getting into mischief. Isaiah doted on her shamelessly. Their land prospered too. Isaiah had proven himself to be a skilled rancher, and the owner of the ranch where he worked offered to sell him a herd on credit. Isaiah took the gamble, and it paid off. Within 5 years, they had expanded their land to 50 acres and ran a small but profitable cattle operation. It was not a huge ranch, but it was enough to provide a comfortable life for their growing family. Hannah continued her seamstress work from home, creating beautiful dresses for the women of Taylor and surrounding towns. Her skill became well known, and she never lacked for orders. Between her income and Isaiah's ranching, they were able to save money and slowly improve their property. Their third child, a boy they named Daniel, arrived when Thomas was 7 and Rose was 4. He was a quiet, thoughtful child, different from his boisterous siblings. He loved books and learning, and Hannah would read to him for hours. Isaiah made sure all his children learned to ride and work the ranch, but he never pushed them into paths they did not want. He wanted them to have choices he had never had. The years rolled by like the turning of a great wheel. Isaiah's hair started to show gray at the temples. Hannah's hands bore the marks of her years of work, but her smile was as bright as the day Isaiah first carried her into the sunlight. Their love, rather than fading with time, had only deepened. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, sick children and crop failures, but they had weathered it all together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Isaiah took Hannah back to the spot where he had found her. The old storm shelter was still there, though the door hung open now, and the interior was filled with debris. They stood looking at it in silence for a long moment. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if I had ridden a different path that day?" Isaiah asked quietly. Hannah slipped her hand into his. "I try not to. It is too terrible to consider." "I think about it sometimes," Isaiah admitted. "About how close I came to just riding past. I almost did not stop. I almost convinced myself those tracks were not worth investigating." He turned to face her. "But something made me stop. Call it fate or God or just dumb luck, but something brought me to you that day. And I am grateful for it every single day," Hannah said. "You gave me my life back, Isaiah. More than that, you gave me a life worth living. A home children love. Everything I have, everything I am, started when you broke down that door." Isaiah pulled her close, and they stood there together, holding each other beside the place where their story had begun. The sun was setting, and the Texas sky was ablaze with color. A gentle breeze stirred the grass, and somewhere in the distance a hawk cried. "I love you, Hannah Pike," Isaiah murmured against her hair. "From the moment I first saw you until the day I die, I will love you." "And I love you," Hannah replied. "My cowboy, my hero, my heart." They rode home together as darkness fell, side by side. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful together. Their children were waiting when they arrived. Thomas, now a young man of 22 working the ranch alongside his father. Rose at 18 preparing to marry a good man from a neighboring ranch. And Daniel at 16 studying to become a teacher. The house was warm and bright, filled with the sounds of family and life. They gathered around the dinner table, all of them together, and Isaiah looked around at the faces of the people he loved most in the world. His wife, still beautiful to him after all these years. His children, grown and growing. The home they had built with their own hands and hearts. He thought back to the man he had been at 24, drifting and rootless, not knowing what he was searching for. And he thought about how one decision, one choice to stop and investigate, had changed the entire course of his life, had given him everything that mattered. After dinner, when the children had gone to their own pursuits, Isaiah and Hannah sat on the porch in the rocking chairs Isaiah had made years ago. They held hands in the comfortable silence of people who knew each other completely. The stars came out one by one, and the night sounds of the ranch surrounded them, cattle lowing softly, horses shifting in the barn, the wind in the cottonwood trees. "You ever regret it?" Hannah asked suddenly. "Giving up the cattle drives, the freedom to roam, you loved that life." "I loved that life because I did not know any better," Isaiah said. "I thought freedom meant having no ties, nothing holding me down. But real freedom is choosing where you want to be and who you want to be with. I chose you, Hannah. I chose this life. And I have never regretted it for a single moment." Hannah squeezed his hand. "We have been blessed. We have," Isaiah agreed, "more than I ever thought possible." The years continued to pass. Rose married and moved to her husband's ranch 20 miles away, though she visited often, and eventually gave Isaiah and Hannah their first grandchild, a boy with Isaiah's green eyes. Thomas married a schoolteacher from Taylor and brought her to live on the Pike Ranch, where they built a small house on the far corner of the property. Daniel went off to college in Austin, fulfilling his dream of becoming a teacher. Isaiah and Hannah grew old together, their hair turning white, their steps slowing. But their love never diminished. They still held hands when they walked. Isaiah still brought Hannah wildflowers when he found them on the range. Hannah still made Isaiah's favorite meals and darned his socks. They still sat on the porch every evening, watching the sun set over their land. When Isaiah was 55, he took a bad fall from a horse and injured his back. It healed, but he could no longer do the heavy ranch work. Thomas took over most of the operations, and Isaiah transitioned into an advisory role, teaching his grandchildren about ranching and life while Hannah continued her sewing, though her fingers were too arthritic now for the fine detail work. She focused on quilts instead, creating beautiful pieces that would become family heirlooms. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. By then, they had 5 grandchildren, with another on the way. The house they had built had been expanded over the years to accommodate family gatherings, and it was filled to bursting with love and laughter. That night, lying in bed together, Hannah turned to Isaiah in the darkness. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day? When you were carrying me out of the shelter?" "I said a lot of things," Isaiah replied, his voice rougher with age but still warm. "You said, 'I have got you,'" Hannah recalled, "and you said it like a promise, like you would never let me fall." "And I never did," Isaiah said. "I never will." "I know," Hannah whispered. She nestled closer to him and he wrapped his arms around her just as he had done for 30 years. "We have had a good life, Haven, not we, the best life," Isaiah confirmed. "The very best." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, 2 hearts beating in rhythm. Outside, the Texas wind sang through the grass and the stars wheeled overhead, and the ranch they had built together stood solid and strong, a testament to what 2 people could create when they chose love. Their story became legend in Taylor. The old-timers would tell it in the saloon, the story of the cowboy who rescued the girl from the underground prison and married her. Young couples would visit the old storm shelter, now a local landmark, and make wishes for a love as strong as Isaiah and Hannah Pike's. Their grandchildren would beg for the story over and over, and Hannah would tell it, her voice soft with memory, while Isaiah would hold her hand and add details she forgot. As they moved into their 60s, their health remained good. Isaiah's back troubled him on cold days, and Hannah's hands ached in the mornings, but they were still active, still engaged in life. They watched their grandchildren grow, attended weddings and christenings, mourned the loss of friends, and celebrated new beginnings. On Isaiah's 68th birthday, Hannah surprised him with a gift. It was a photograph she had commissioned, a formal portrait of the 2 of them taken in town. They were dressed in their Sunday best, sitting close together, their hands clasped. The photographer had captured something special, the way they looked at each other, the obvious love and affection that radiated from the image. "So we will always remember," Hannah said softly. "So the children and grandchildren will always know what we looked like, how we were together." Isaiah studied the photograph with tears in his eyes. They were old now, their faces lined and weathered, but in the photograph, he could still see the young woman he had carried out of the darkness, and she could still see the young cowboy who had saved her life. The love between them was as visible as their physical forms, captured forever in silver and paper. "It is perfect," Isaiah said hoarsely. "Just like you, just like us." They hung the photograph in the parlor, where everyone who visited could see it. It became a treasured family possession, passed down through generations, a reminder of where the Pike family had truly begun. Not in the storm shelter where Hannah had been imprisoned, but in the moment, Isaiah chose to stop and help, chose to care about a stranger's suffering, chose love over indifference. Their 70th year brought sorrow when Daniel's wife died in childbirth, leaving him with a newborn daughter. Daniel was devastated, and Isaiah and Hannah opened their home to him and the baby. Hannah, at 71 years old, helped raise her granddaughter while Daniel worked and slowly healed. It was hard work, caring for an infant at her age, but Hannah would not have had it any other way. Family was everything. Isaiah, despite his age and his aching back, would walk the floor at night with the baby when she cried, singing old cowboy songs in his creaky voice. The baby, named Hope at Hannah's suggestion, thrived under their care. Gradually, Daniel's heart mended, and after 2 years he met a widow in town who had lost her own husband. They married, and Hope gained a loving stepmother, but she remained especially close to her grandparents, the 2 old people who had cared for her when she needed them most. As Isaiah and Hannah entered their mid-70s, they began to slow down significantly. Isaiah could no longer ride, his body too stiff and sore. Hannah's eyesight was failing and she had to give up her sewing entirely, but they had each other, and that was enough. They would sit on the porch for hours, Hannah's head on Isaiah's shoulder, watching their family work the ranch that they had built together. Thomas ran the ranch now with his sons, and it had grown into a substantial operation, one of the most successful in the county. The Pike name was respected throughout Texas, but Isaiah and Hannah took no credit. They simply felt blessed to have built something that would outlast them, a legacy of hard work and love. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Isaiah turned to Hannah with a serious expression. "Hannah, I need you to know something." She looked at him, concerned by his tone. "What is it? If something happens to me, if I go first, I need you to know that every single day with you has been a gift. You made my life mean something. Before I found you, I was just drifting, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to be better than I was. You gave me a family, a home, a life worth living." His voice cracked. "I need you to know that I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I would choose you every single time." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Isaiah Pike, do not talk like that. We still have years ahead of us." "Maybe," Isaiah said, "but I am old, Hannah, and my body is tired, and I just need you to hear me say it while I still can. I love you. I have loved you from the moment I saw you in that darkness, and I will love you beyond my last breath." Hannah cupped his weathered face in her gnarled hands. "And I love you. You saved me, Isaiah, not just from that storm shelter, but from a life of loneliness and fear. You showed me what love could be. You gave me everything. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to you." They kissed then, a gentle kiss that held 47 years of love and partnership. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, and they held each other as the stars began to appear. Isaiah lived another 3 years, long enough to see his 80th birthday. He died peacefully in his sleep on a cool October night, Hannah beside him as she had been for nearly 50 years. His last words, whispered just before he closed his eyes for the final time, were, "I have got you, Hannah, always." The funeral was enormous. People came from all over Texas to pay their respects to Isaiah Pike, the man who had built his life on hard work, integrity, and love. Hannah stood beside his grave, supported by her children, and said goodbye to the man who had been her everything. But she did not crumble. Isaiah had made her strong. He had taught her that love was not just feeling, but action. That commitment was not just words, but a daily choice. She carried those lessons with her as she continued living, surrounded by the family they had created together. Hannah lived another 5 years after Isaiah's death. She spent her final years surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, telling stories about the man she had loved, keeping his memory alive. She never remarried, never even considered it. Isaiah had been her one great love, and she was content with the time they had been given. On a warm spring morning, just after her 85th birthday, Hannah Foster Pike died quietly in her sleep. The family buried her beside Isaiah, beneath a cottonwood tree on the hill overlooking the ranch they had built. The headstone was simple but perfect, bearing both their names and a single inscription: Isaiah Pike, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He carried her from darkness into light. Hannah Foster Pike, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She filled his life with love. Together always. Their story did not end with their deaths. It lived on in their descendants in the ranch that still bore the Pike name in the town of Taylor, where they were remembered as legends. But most of all, it lived on in the lesson they had taught through their lives. That love is not found in grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but in choosing to care for another person, in breaking down doors to reach someone in need, in building a life together one day at a time. The old storm shelter still stands outside of Taylor, Texas. It is a historical landmark now, maintained by the Pike family. Couples visit it every year, holding hands, imagining that terrible moment when Hannah Foster lay dying in the darkness and the miraculous moment when Isaiah Pike found her. They look at each other and silently promise to be each other's light, to never let each other face the darkness alone. And on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right across the Texas prairie, old-timers swear they can still hear it, the sound of a cowboy's voice calling down into the darkness. I have got you. You are safe now. I promise you, you are safe. It is the echo of a promise kept, a life saved, and a love that conquered darkness and time itself. The story of Isaiah Pike and Hannah Foster remains, as all great love stories do, eternal and unbreakable. A testament to the truth that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop when everyone else rides past, to care when it would be easier not to, and to love with everything we have, for as long as we are given. Their legacy is not just the successful ranch or the large family or the respect they earned in their community. Their legacy is the proof that real love, true love, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond, is not found, it is built. Built in moments of courage, in choices to stay, in promises kept, in hands held through joy and sorrow alike. Isaiah Pike broke down a door and carried Hannah Foster out of darkness. And in return, she carried him through life, through all the years that followed. Two souls intertwined so completely that even death could not truly separate them. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and they had chosen each other every day after, building something beautiful from that terrible beginning. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the values they had lived by. Work hard, love deeply, keep your promises, and never ride past someone in need. The Pike family would thrive for generations, but they would never forget the foundation on which they were built, the love story that started in a storm shelter outside of Taylor, Texas, in the summer of 1874. And so the story ends as all the best stories do, not with an ending at all, but with a continuation. Isaiah and Hannah's love continues in their descendants, in the ranch that still operates today, in the town that still tells their story. It continues in every person who chooses to stop and help, who chooses love over fear, light over darkness. The cowboy broke down the door and carried her out, and in doing so, he found his own salvation. She was locked in darkness, and he brought her into the light, but the truth was they saved each other. They gave each other the greatest gift possible, a life of love, partnership, and unwavering devotion. Their story is proof that even in the harshest circumstances, even in the wild and dangerous world of the Texas frontier, love can bloom, endure, and triumph. That is the legacy of Isaiah and Hannah Pike, and it will never be forgotten.